Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Catalyst webinar series presented by the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA. The Catalyst webinar series is a bi-weekly educational platform for creating success and change in your club and career. We're excited to have Daniela Lendl and Rob Keller from the PGA Tour on this morning, talking about the updates and the changes to the USGA rules of golf. Rob Keller is no stranger to the Southern California PGA. He was with the section for 10 years prior to going to the PGA Tour as a tour referee and Corn Ferry Tour official. Rob was a Canadian Tour member and All-American out of Cal State San Marcos. And like I said, he was with the SCPGA for 10 years prior to going to the PGA Tour. Daniela Lendl has been with the PGA Tour for the last 2 years. Prior to that, she was actually with the USGA for 4 years and was part of the rewrite in 2019. Prior to that, she worked with the Connecticut State Golf Association, and she was also a coach at the University of Denver for the women's golf team there. Daniela, Rob, good morning. Thanks for being with us on the Catalyst webinar series.
Morning, John. Thanks for having us.
Of course. Thank you very much for carving out the time to educate the section and our members on the updates. The floor is yours. We try to make the Catalyst webinars. I know, Rob, you've done this. You used to do this for us every other year. We've been doing it now for several years, but I don't think you've done it since we've gone to the Zoom format. You were doing it on the gotomeeting.com platform. So we try to make it as interactive as possible. I'll keep an eye on the question board and the raised hands in the audience. And once we get towards the end of your slide deck, we'll open it up to questions, Q&A. Obviously, when it comes to rules, there's a lot of situational questions that I'm sure the membership will have for us. I may have a few myself as well. So take it away. It's all yours. And thanks again for joining us this morning.
Hey, thanks again for having us. I really do appreciate it. And thank you, Daniela, for being able to join as well. Daniela with our staff brings a lot of knowledge from the USGA and her time there and the understanding of the concepts that were changed when we moved to the 2019 rules, which are now generally still in place with these 2023 rules. But with any changes you're going to find, you're going to have some adjustments that are needed as you play 4 years of golf under these rules. And as you all know, this is now a joint code. So the RNA and USGA use the same code. What we'll talk about today, the 2023 rules of golf, there's 3 documents that I'm going to share on the screen today. We're going to talk briefly about. These are all found on usga.org. I would recommend favoriting their rules reference page because all of these are very helpful when it's going to come to dealing with your members or preparing yourselves for play as we start come January. I'm sure right out of the gates, it's going to be a lot of golf for the Farmers Insurance Open spots, etc. there in SoCal, which I miss, but let's jump right in. I just want to cover this sheet very quickly. This is very simple for y'all to have posted at your clubs. Here's the 5 key changes, right? So we've added Rule 25, or I should say the USGA's rule added Rule 25. That's modifications for players with disabilities. Some good information in there. I know Joe Groman, very, very happy that this is in there. Joe's really been a pioneer in this and pushed a lot for golfers with disabilities, which is phenomenal. Replacing damaged clubs. They've tried to clean this up. We'll talk about this more later. There's still some model local rules that are going to be in place that are going to basically keep the outcomes the same in 2019 as they were in 23. This is more of a general rule for your memberships. If a club is damaged during the round, except when it's abuse, you can replace it. So this is any kind of damage during a round, can replace it, repair it, or go ahead and continue to use it. So that's kind of just cleaned that up in there. These next 3 to me are the big ones and where we're going to focus on our time for you today. Ball moved by natural forces. Y'all have seen these. Waste Management Open is notorious for it because of how their banks into the lakes and the tight cut on the grass at the time of year creates a problem where a player would drop from a penalty area, let's say, gets the ball placed and walks away and the ball rolls back into the penalty area. It's something that needed to be addressed. I think we all agreed on it. But it's also going to, provide its challenges. So we'll talk you through those here in a little bit. But basically now, once you drop, place, or replace a ball in a particular area of the golf course and it is at rest, your ball is going to stay in that same condition. So if it rolls into a bunker, you're coming back out. If it rolls into a penalty area, you're coming back to that same spot. If it rolls onto the putting green after you've dropped it off the putting green, we're coming back off the putting green, which that is a change also. So that's a negative impact, right? Sometimes your ball would roll onto the putting green and you would just go play it from where it came to rest. So we'll go through some more of those, but the simplified back online relief, there's some concepts that we'll cover today that are broad concepts, right? One of the concepts was that when putting a ball back in play, you're dropping in a relief area. The relief area would either be 2 club lengths or 1 club length from a particular spot. This is kind of the one-off. This is different. What we're doing now is we've had to go to where the ball is dropped anywhere on that line and can roll up to a club length any direction. So in the effort when the rules were written in 2019 to keep everything consistent, this would have been consistent, right? You pick a spot, you measure a club length, ball stays in the relief area. In concept, that sounds great until you start putting people on golf courses and they start just going back on the line, dropping a ball, and the ball rolls forward, say one rotation. Well, if they hadn't selected a spot where that ball dropped was deemed to be where they had selected, now it's rolled forward and now it's a potential penalty. So I believe it was 2020, Daniela, you can correct me here, but that was fixed with basically a model local rule, or was that actually a clarification?
Yeah, I believe it was a model local rule that was added that just essentially said the player could have their ball roll up to a club length, essentially creating a circle as the relief area. And that really just prevented what you just mentioned, Rob, is, hey, did the player pick a spot? Did the player not pick a spot? And to your point, the goal was consistency, but in practice, it wasn't helpful. So this new version of it kind of takes it back in time, but allows for the player to have a little more flexibility in where their ball ends up.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you for that. And again, we'll talk broader concepts, but there's a couple of these changes where they're trying to keep things consistent, and just in reality, it doesn't quite stay there, unfortunately. So we'll get into those couple of examples here shortly. And then handicap on your scorecard. So this is big for all of you who are overseeing any competitions or tournaments at your facilities. It used to be basically that the player was required to put their handicap on the scorecard. They were responsible for their handicap and the application, right? That is flipped on its head. It is now the committee's responsibility. There is a model local rule that's being introduced in these rules that will keep it the same, that you'll still put the onus on the player. But I would think most committees would want to go ahead and take this under their umbrella. And that way, if there are any errors, they can pin it on the committee and we can play golf a little more stress-free for our members and players. But that is one that I think I'm going to recommend any of y'all that conduct net competitions do read through, just to be, crystal clear with that one as we go. So I'm going to pop to a different screen here. Give me 1 second. And this is going to be a little more detailed for what we are going to go through. Hold on, please. Boom. Okay. Principal changes introduced in the 2023 rules of golf. So these are inside the front cover of the official guide to the rules of golf. So anybody that's gone to a rules workshop, anybody that's gone ahead and ordered a rules book, you've got the rules of golf book, and then you have the official guide to the rules of golf. I would have this in your golf shop at all times. I'm sure all of you do. I hope all of you do. But look, inside this, it's got 11 key points here in the principal changes. And these are specific rule changes and a couple of general changes that we've started to go over in the previous document, right? So again, here we go, trying to simplify and clean up and make these even more player friendly and more, I guess, clear. Let's just call it clear, because it's not all the time. But look, 1.34, we're not going to talk about this one much. Okay. We're applying penalties in multiple breaches. They've just kind of amended that again, cleaning it up as to whether breaches are related or unrelated. And this is going to mean that there are going to be fewer instances of these multiple penalties being applied. So they're trying to lump everything together. Look, 2 strokes is enough penalty in most cases for just about anything you do on the course, right? So that's kind of where they're getting to is, look, if you've done multiple things here, let's get you out of here. Let's give you your 2 and let's move on. Rule 33B, that's what we just talked about with handicap. It's going to be something that's on the committee, but there also will be a model local rule we'll talk about. There's club repair, rule 4. 6.3, substituting another ball while playing a hole. This is a concept. And the concept here is that when we're substituting a ball, we're getting more lenient with letting players substitute a ball, right? So if you're operating under a rule, dropping from a cart path, you can substitute a new ball into play. So you accidentally chuck your ball to your caddy and he misses and it goes into the lake at 17 at TPC Sawgrass. You're not getting penalized if you can't go down and find that golf ball. You're free to substitute a ball because you accidentally lost that golf ball. This is building on that. Now we're getting to where, okay, 2 strokes is too much. 1 stroke penalty is enough to cover if somebody substitutes a ball incorrectly during the play of a hole. Ball moved by natural forces we talked about. Other help. John, we're gonna kind of bounce around this one. This is
Well, real quick, Rob, what's the substitution on the penalty from a general penalty to a 1-stroke penalty? What's the equity in that, or what's the rationale behind that change? But why?
So I'll give my 2 cents, and then Daniela, I want you just to give us yours as well in this. But so the equity in it is saying, look, we're already allowing you, if you're operating under a rule, to replace a ball, right? So I can put a new ball in play if I'm operating under a rule anywhere on the golf course. I think what they've come to with that is it's too severe for what the player's gaining for as an advantage. So what's the advantage of me lifting my ball to identify it? I see that it looks fine, but I decide that I want to put a new ball down. I put a new ball down in the exact same place. What advantage have I gained? What potential advantage have I gained? And where in the rules would that fall equity-wise as far as, okay, a penalty for that? And you'll see another concept we're going to talk about too, John, where a wrong place, and Danielle and I have some mixed opinions on this as well, but where a wrong place penalty may not need to be fixed, and you're just going to take the 2 strokes and go on, even though under some of the old code, you and I might argue that it was a serious breach because it was a significant advantage in a couple of these scenarios. So Daniela, I'm curious as to your take on that too.
Yeah, and Rob, your points are really good. That's a large part of it. This discussion started right away when the 2019 rules took effect, and part of this has to really do with how good golf balls are now. There's not a significant difference between, there are and there aren't, but the player is not going to gain a significant advantage by playing a Titleist and then playing, something else, a Callaway. The balls are so good now that, to your point, 2 strokes is a lot for, swapping a golf ball when you picked it up to identify it, or so really that's another aspect to everything Rob has said, but largely the penalty was severe for what you're really gaining from it.
Thanks, Lendl. The other help, this is an interesting one. It's more, I think, the caddies that we've had to deal with this. This is probably more of a tour or high level USGA, like national competition, rule 10.2b with other help. There is something that we're going to talk about real briefly for y'all, which is about the partners. It cleans up some of what a partner can and can't do with standing on that line of play. That restricted area is now the new verbiage is written, and we'll hit that briefly for you all. This 11.1b, ball in motion accidentally hitting a person or outside influence. So this is one of these concepts that we're talking about here, right? So this is now, okay, we made it to where we've called an insect, or, basically, okay, a ball hit from a putting green hits a beetle on the putting green, and was, because that beetle was in motion, it had to be replayed. So it takes out some of that and cleans that up. If the Jesper Parnevik, where I lip out a 1-footer and it lips around and hits my putter, I don't have to put it back. I don't have to, I can keep playing. The stroke's not replayed. And that, again, this was born out of a couple of tour instances, I'll admit it. But I do think that there was some concern about it prior to this happening. And then of course it happened. And so hence a change. But again, we don't want to, what the big focus on with the Joint Rules Committee between the RNA, the USGA, and all of the international tour representatives is we don't need to penalize players in some of these actions where there's really no need for a penalty, right? This was accidental. If you're talking about something like this is accidentally hitting the club again. So, and really, we've got insects all over our putting surfaces. We play outdoors. So how often are we going to start nitpicking? Oh, it didn't go in, it hit this ant over here. Well, it didn't. So just cleaning it up, trying to move ourselves on a little more with the game, not get stuck. Penalties in Stableford. So this is going to be kind of a little concept thing we'll talk about in some of the team formats that y'all might play at the clubs. Rule 25, and then these general changes that we already talked about. So back online relief procedures for each of the different places in the rules that they're covered. They're listed there, the 5 different spots. How to proceed when stroke must be replayed. This is another general change. So they used to use the phrase stroke does not count. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. So you hit an overhead power line, let's say, and we're going to cover this example, but I had an overhead power line and I know that I did. I had virtual certainty that I did, and I didn't replay the stroke. Well, I'm going to be able to keep playing and not get disqualified for not going back and replaying, but I am going to incur a penalty for doing that, right? So not a huge change. I don't know how many of y'all deal with overhead power lines. I remember Fallbrook off the very first tee, I think it was, you could sit there and hit that thing for days. But I don't recall a whole lot more. So Daniela, why don't you, I'm going to get this third screen up here. Why don't you start us off? John, do you have any questions while I switch this over so far that Daniela could field here?
Not yet. Not yet. I'll interject him as she goes through.
Very good. Okay. And there we are.
All right. So reasonable judgment was introduced in this 2019 code. And honestly, I mean, it's been a really great addition to the rules. Players trying to figure out if they've dropped from knee height, you're using reasonable judgment. It's great for us. It's great for the players. But there were a lot of questions surrounding it. And one of them had to do with where could it apply? Anywhere? Where is it applying? So this outcome change is really to help clarify that you can use reasonable judgment to determine where your ball lies on the golf course. This came up kind of right after, early in this code, just to know, hey, you can use it to determine if your ball lies in or out of bounds, if it's in a penalty area, what area of the course is it? And you are allowed to use this, just clarifying essentially what it can be used for. So not too groundbreaking, but it's a great concept to have in the rules. As Rob already kind of mentioned, the multiple penalties, intervening acts, related, unrelated, it was very complicated. Nobody understood it really. It was not understood by the players. It certainly wasn't understood by a lot of us. And this really cleans it up a lot. It makes it much, much, much easier. There's only going to be 2 intervening events now. If you complete your stroke, and then if you're aware of the breach, and that makes a big difference. So you can do a lot of different things before you complete your stroke, and there's just going to be a single penalty for it. Very, very good change in the rules. I don't anticipate you guys will have to use that very much, hopefully, but just a good one to know. All right. There is. Yeah, go ahead, Rob. Go. You stole this page.
Yeah, I'll take this next one if that's okay, because I think that's kind of where we were talking about, and then if you want to take it from there again. The meaning of handicap a player is responsible for. So the player, this is the one outcome where a player can still get himself in trouble is if you give your opponent incorrect information, right, and you're giving too few strokes, you're still going to get disqualified. So as we said before, this concept is that they're trying to bring it back under the committee, try to limit the players from causing themselves too much self-inflicted harm here. But this is the one area where you can really cause self-inflicted harm still, is if in match play, let's say, they're going out and, setting up play at your own pace match play bracket. And I tell my opponent that I am a 3 and I'm a 6 and we start playing, and I'm going to get disqualified for that under 3-2C. That's just, I've given them incorrect information and go, this isn't going to fall under the category of the committee and say a stroke play event where you've got to, net, put your 5 strokes down, committee's going to calculate that for you. This is kind of a one-off of that. So it's the one place where a player can really still get themselves in trouble in match play is I declare a stroke basically more than I would supposed to get. So 6 versus 3.
Well, Rob, just a kind of a conflicting thought process here. Players are allowed to sign for higher scores than what they got and not get disqualified because they're not presenting an advantage. Why wouldn't this fall under that same umbrella? If you want to play as a 3 when you're actually a 6, you're only penalizing yourself. Why would that merit a disqualification?
Yeah, so I spoke incorrectly there. It's backwards. It's a 6 versus a 3, right? So I say I'm a 6 when I'm actually a 3. So I that's me crossing it up. So apologies there. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is just the same thing. I'm coming out as a 3. I tell the guy I'm a 6. I'm getting 6 strokes. We start to play. I'm done. I've been disqualified under 3-2C. It's pretty cut and dry. And again, there's a model local rule that comes in here. I think it's L2 that puts the onus back on the player to put their handicap on the scorecard. Actually, make them responsible for that, not the committee. But that's separate of what this instance would be, which is I've given my opponent incorrect information on my handicap, and we're playing, under the premise that I'm getting more shots than I'm supposed to.
What was the stupid question? What was the rule? What was the rule on that prior to that change? Just the loss of however many holes you played under that incorrect handicap?
Yeah, so I think, in Daniela, you're going to be able to speak to this better too, but I think it was more just to accurately reflect. Well, Lendl, I'll let you speak about it. I have a thought, but I'm not sure that's correct. So.
Sorry, I just had to unmute myself. I'm not sure that I have a good answer, John. I think it's just handicap conversations happen a lot, and it's trying to eliminate some confusion. It's kind of the same reason that, we haven't gotten there yet, but requirements to show handicap on a scorecard are being put on the committee. It's just trying to make it a little bit
as
easier.
Opposed to just making it easier to merit a full-on disqualification, as opposed to trying to determine how many holes were played under a false handicap. Is that just kind of just to make it more cut and dry? You play under a handicap that's higher than what you really are, you're disqualified. There's no determining how many holes were played or how long that information stood, or for however long in that match that went on. Is that kind of the thought process?
Yeah, I mean, it looks, based on what they've got in this document, it just looks like they've kind of removed the ability to correct that in a way. it's, I'll let Rob add his thought, but it's just making it a little bit more black and white, it seems, in this document is what the explanation's been given. I can't say I look at handicaps very often anymore at all. So this is definitely one of those areas that, we're not as familiar with as we could or should be.
I do think that this falls into the category of things when they talk match play that you're talking about one-on-one. So this is you and your opponent. So you've removed a lot of the committee out of this, right, John? So there are instances when you're playing that you say, yeah, you're good, take relief from that. I think that this is them just drawing that line between in a stroke play, keeping everybody consistent. Let's make the committee responsible for it. And then that way, that application we know is going to be done correctly. A player is not going to get incorrectly or penalized for no good reason, let's call it. In this case, the player should be responsible playing a match against another player in a net competition to know their own handicap and to correctly inform the player, their opponent of that. And so I think this is really just taking stroke play, match play, and let's get into the match play bubble over here and say, hey, look, this is one-on-one. Now it's the two of you. And if you're just incorrectly giving your opponent information, there's a problem. And just being cut and dry with it that way. I feel like that's where they're making that declaration with this is let's take match play and stroke play. And this is solely a match play outcome. So I'd like to skip down. I don't know if anybody's interested in limitations on green reading materials 4.3A1. There's some equipment stuff in here, building a club from parts being carried. That's really a tour related thing. I don't know that that's going to interest a whole lot of folks. It's something that for us needed to be cleaned up. We were having all kinds of issues with that out there. People, carrying a shaft or a club head that weren't part of the player's side, the caddy or whatever. And it just needed to be clear in the rules. And it's really not that much fun.
But even though, were they making these equipment changes during the round, or they just had the equipment on them?
They had the equipment on them. So the way that the rules under our MLR G9, I believe it is, reads is significant damage for us to have a player change a club out, right? So if you've got some damage and you start the round with it, if it's the club still conforming, so say hairline crack, good to go. Start with it that way. It's club still conforming. It's also not significantly damaged, right? So we had players that were concerned that because of this hairline crack, as they played throughout the round, that the club was going to become significantly damaged, break, etc. So they wanted to put their replacement head in the bag so that they could just pop the shaft, put the new head on, keep going if that driver broke. Well, not covered under the rules. You can't do that. That can't be carried with you. A component can't be carried with you to repair a broken or damaged club. This is just tightening it up, right? This is just really making it, hey, nobody can carry this on the course for you. If you're going to have something break and are concerned about it, you just need to leave it in your locker, let the committee know. And we do this fairly often, believe it or not, is we'll have a player know that Justin Suh in Omaha this year, perfect example. He didn't want to tee off the first tee and start his round because he was concerned that he wasn't going to be able to replace this club. And so, basically wasn't significantly damaged, had a hairline crack. And we just said, look, if you leave it here, if you take it apart and take the shaft with you, you can't use that shaft. And it seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Like, okay, well, that's just part of the club. But as soon as you separate it, those become components. And you can't use the component to create a new club and make it your 14th club that you're carrying with you. That would be like somebody carrying a 3-wood head and a 5-wood head and a shaft and waiting until they got to, well, do I need to use the 3-wood or the 5-wood, and then attach that club and call that their 14th club.
But if his club broke during the round, he could have a brand new club, brand new shaft brought out to him and can continue.
Correct. Exactly. Brought out to him is the key word there. Just can't have it being carried by a 4 caddy, his caddy, a manager, a fitness trainer, nobody is associated with him, nobody on the golf course at all. He can't get it to a spectator and say, hey, carry this up for me in case this breaks. Okay, I'll buy you lunch. He can't do that. That's just clean. It's just cleaning it up. The verbiage before was a little bit loose, and it just needed to be, look, it can't be carried. It can't be out there. So
regarding the green reading material, could you delve into that a little bit?
yeah. So again, conceptual, right? So when we built this originally as the rules of golf under that joint rules committee, it sounded great that when we gave you a limitation on using green reading material, that you could only use conforming materials when it came to being around the putting green. So say I'm going to use putter from off the green, or I've got a putt, my ball's now at rest. I know the ball's at rest on the green. I can't use these specific materials. It just made sense more and more as you watch people play with 3-woods, hybrids, all these little chips and pitches around the greens. That why not just clean it up? And so now it's basically limited once you know that your ball's on the putting green and it's a stroke from the putting green only. And that's, again, it's to try to limit some of these unnecessary penalties. So for most international tours, we've adopted a model local rule for this, right? Which kind of takes this out anyway, because we're providing one book, and that's the only book they can use. And there's all kinds of guidelines that I don't even want to waste everybody's time with on those books that they can use, but the committee approves it. They can use that one book. They can put in their own handwritten notes, but we take out, the detail on the putting greens. Anything less than 4.5% of slope does not show up on this book. You can't take a break master out there, throw it on the green, and start jotting numbers down in your book. It's different. This is just saying, look, if normal play at your members clubs, or say a tournament play at your members clubs, the limitations now apply only to a stroke made on the putting green for greens reading materials. And again, it's something to know, I think, for everybody, just as general knowledge when you're watching golf on TV. I highly doubt that this really makes a big impact on y'all's day-to-day play or professions.
Rob, before we move on, one thing I just want to mention, if kind of in relation to scorecards, is, well, 2 things. One is there's no longer a requirement if you have more than one person keeping the scorecard for you. Like Rob and I are out playing, we have another player in the group, I have to withdraw, I leave, I sign Rob's card, then the other player had to sign Rob's card. That's gone away. So just one signature on the scorecard is enough. So that's important, club championships, things like that. The other, and this is up to each of you, it will be a local rule, but the other key one is there will be a local rule available to eliminate the disqualification penalty for not signing a scorecard. Essentially, it puts that responsibility on the committee, and there wouldn't be a DQ. I believe it just becomes a 2-stroke penalty, and that way the player, you'll kind of notice as we go through and as these rules keep changing, disqualification penalties keep getting eliminated. So this is an example of that where, the guy or guy or girl forgot to sign the card. Why should they be disqualified? Maybe you have a volunteer in the scoring area who forgot to mention it, didn't check it, whatever. So one key thing, if you have interest in using that, it is a local rule available starting on January 1st. And then on this page that's on Rob's screen here, practicing on the course, for those of you that might be at a facility with more than 18 holes, maybe you have an additional 9, maybe you have a par 3 course, maybe you have another 18. This information in regards to Rule 5.2 is just saying, hey, if you're playing the championship golf course for your tournament, you are allowed to practice on other holes that aren't considered the golf course that you're playing in the event. So good to know if you have more than 18 holes out there. And it's kind of really just clarifying what wasn't spoken for before.
And again, that's a lot of this, right? So we're cleaning up. They're just taking stuff that you put the best minds in the world on this new code, and you're still going to come up with some holes. And so we're just trying to fill in some holes and clean some things up. Danielle, if you're okay with it, I know that we've got the 9.3. We talked about the ball at rest moved by natural forces. I think this one's worth some time. And then 11.1b, like the next page, I think has some very important content. So I'd like to get through those at least with y'all. I'll take this 9.3, Danielle, and leave you the 11.1b. I know you have a special interest in that and have had some conversations with the USGA on that. So that's all you. But 9.3, this is the ball at rest moved by natural forces. This is our showcase media, social media firestorm from some of our events where it's so unfair. The rules of golf are so unfair. They should just let them put it back. You shouldn't have to have a 1-stroke penalty if you've put a ball back in play. Well, you know what? They're right. They were right. You shouldn't. But the way that the code was written, once I dropped the ball, it came to rest outside of a penalty area, and it then rolled back into a penalty area. The ball was in play as soon as it was at rest. This is now just taking that. My ball's at rest after dropping, placing or replacing in an area of the golf course. Then by natural forces is moved into a different area of the golf course. I'm replacing the ball. Okay, so that's eliminating the penalty stroke for, I've taken the one penalty stroke from a red penalty area and dropped it twice, couldn't come to rest, placed it, barely came to rest. I walk away, it rolls back into the penalty area. That used to be go play the ball from the penalty area again. Okay, now we're going back to the place where I got the ball to come to rest, where I placed it and it was at rest. Ball's coming back to that under no penalty. Same if that was a bunker, same concept. The one concept that I think people don't think about so much is I've hit my ball to the back of the green. I'm just off the green. I take relief from a sprinkler head. I've dropped it an inch or less from the green, right? I'm trying to drop it as close as I can so I can putt it. So I place it, ball comes to rest. I step back, take practice strokes. I line it up, and as I'm starting to stand over the ball again, it rolls down to 3 feet. Well, that used to be a good break. It's not any longer. Now the ball's coming back, being placed on the collar, an inch off the collar, and no penalty, but you don't get the advantage there, just the same as you wouldn't get the disadvantage from the ball rolling into a bunker or the ball rolling into a penalty area from the general area. So that is one that I think is worth just everybody knowing there, because you know, the 2 and 2, the movable or immovable obstructions within 2 club lengths of the putting green, I think that's been a great add. This is one of those areas, though. I had multiple rulings. I had this is name dropping, but I had Justin Thomas, John Rahm, and Dustin Johnson in a 4-group span at Riviera 2 years ago on the 10th green that all hit it into the front left and were putting up over that knoll. And every single one of them had within 2 club lengths of the green and within their ball within 2 club lengths of that obstruction intervention of line of play, basically under this local rule. And we were dropping, and all of them were just slightly different. And every single one of them dropped, trying to drop within an inch of the edge of the putting green. And so it can happen. It is something that does happen, more link style golf courses, but it's out there. And now that you're doing that and the ball can't roll onto the putting surface once it's at rest, it's worth knowing. Lendl, how about you? Does anybody want to talk about the old stand-up putter? I mean, I can't believe that it's got a place in the rules of golf now, but I mean, I remember this thing from like the 80s and 90s. No? Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, can you shed some light on it? It's relevant. I mean, obviously the bloodline putter is fairly popular and people are using it.
This thing, my grandpa Jim, he was sold on this thing. I think he bought it off of a television show back in like the late 80s. But no, the stand-up putter, they basically had to say, look, we're limiting down what you can use for alignment and all these other things. You can't set the putter there, step back and line yourself up by leaving that putter in place, right? So to use a stand-up putter is still conforming, but to use it to actually set down, step behind, and look down a line to help you take your stance and help you align your putt doesn't work. It's no longer allowed under this 10.2b/1.
Now that's as of January 1st, 2023, or is
Correct.
that effective now?
No, so all of this is going to be 23. That's why I say at the very beginning too, John, it's funny. We're just diving into this, right? Because for us, if we start to study this before our season ends, we're just noodles. I mean, you walk up to a ruling and you go, if it has to do with some of these scenarios. So we're really just diving in now. We've completed our Corn Ferry Tour season. Both of our PGA Tour assignments for the year are done. So now we're digging in. This is for January 1. This is coming up January 1. Stand up putter, knock yourself out. Happy to use it. If you love how it rolls, great. But do not stand it there and step behind it and try to help you line up or take your stance for a putt.
That's significant for us here because we have gentlemen on our Thursday and Saturday team that use it, and team play season is right around the corner, and that's going to be a thing.
I think so. I foresee a really good Club Pro Guy series on some of these club changes. I think he might capitalize on this particular rule.
But they can use the stand-up putter to have it stand on its own if they're over the ball.
Yeah, you can't use it. So the way that it's kind of worded in that 10.2b/1 is basically going, look, the player or the caddy is not allowed to set it there and get help in any way that would breach 10.2b, right? So 10.2b is basically saying that any of that alignment, stance, assistance in getting ready to play is a no.
Well, so they can't just set it up. They can't let it stand on its own.
So say that
they're over it.
So say that they could. So the scenario I would say that they could is, look, you put the putter down behind the golf ball and then you let the putter go and adjust your grip.
You can do that.
Right. So the putter would be freestanding. It would be standing there. You're standing over your putt in your stance and you've adjusted your grip. So think about that. A scenario like that would be good. The 10.2b scenarios would be anything that's helping me line up for my stance, extra alignment towards the hole, etc. And that would be stepping away from it, lining the putter head up so that I know that it's aimed a cup left of the hole, and then standing back over it. So those would be your 10.2b breaches.
So as long as they do not get behind the standing putter and use it as a tool, the alignment with it in any way, that's the only rule. They just can't get behind it.
Yeah. So the reason they use anyway is just to have it covered by 10.2b. And that's going to say, if you read it specifically in here with 10.2b, it's the alignment, it's your stance, it's advice or other help that you're getting, say from a caddy. That's where they were limiting the caddy being in that restricted area behind you, is to not be able to gain an advantage from that. So yeah, if you set it down and had to step away from it and step back over to it, you've done nothing in that to help you align or take your stance, etc. Fine, totally fine. I saw Jerry Wiz raised his hand.
Yeah, Jerry Wiz has a question. What about face-on style putting?
Face-on style putting. So
I think Jerry, what he means is maybe side saddle.
Yeah. So Jerry, I totally get where you're coming from. So I think this would be the same thing, right? If you're standing next to the ball and you stay in that general area and you've got it set up next to you and you have to adjust a stance or come off of it, the putter can stand there. If you walk away from it and in any way you're using that to get the putter face lined up, or help you get your stance oriented to your line of play, that's where we're going to have an issue. Right. So just think about the stand-up putter now is the only thing that the stand-up part of the putter is good for is if you need to stay in that position, adjust, leave the putter there where you have it. You know, it's no different than another putter where you have the line on the ball, which I think we all are growing to hate, but you have the alignment line on the ball, and then you're aligning the putter lines up to that and still standing over it. That it's no issue. The 10.2b is going to get really specific to helping you take your stance or getting help aligning that up to your line of play.
Now, do you see the lines on the ball and being able to align the ball from behind the line being an issue down the road, since the kind of as an ongoing initiative from the stand-up putter?
I know there's a lot of chatter about it. I know that there are a lot of people, some forming stronger and stronger opinions. I don't think that this joint rules committee sees that being a change. Daniela?
Yeah, I agree. This came up a ton when these 2019 rules took effect, and so many people, to Rob's point, want to see it eliminated because they think it will help speed up play if you're going back and forth. Some people have said, well, why don't you just say you can only adjust the line once? I don't think they want to go down that road. Of course, I can't speak for them anymore, or never could, but I definitely can't now. And but as of most recently, it just doesn't seem like the path. That's not really any different. What are you supposed to do if you can't draw a line? What's stopping you from using what's already on the ball, the Titleist logo, the Callaway logo, the label of the ball? There's already a ton of stuff on there. So, it's certainly not as easy as people think, thing to change.
Yeah. Perfect. Hey,
let's
go
ahead.
Lendl, do you want to just cut to this 14.2D and kind of the concept, since we're kind of running over a little bit, just the concept there, where we're getting at with the overhead power lines, the recreating altered line stand, how they kind of tie together and where the rules are going with this in 23?
Yeah, so in a lot of cases, there's going to be some rules that talk about where the stroke doesn't count. Rob's example of when you have that local rule in effect, if you were to hit an overhead power line, you'd be required to replay that. I think this really came about because of what we've seen on the putting green, which is kind of wrapped up in Rule 11.1b2. You hit an insect, before. In the current rules, you hit something on the putting green, you're required to replay. You might not even know you hit it, and all of a sudden you're getting a penalty. You could potentially be disqualified. It was a little bit messy. It wasn't what was intended. This local rule came out. That local rule is being baked into the rules. So now what you see on Rob's screen on the right-hand side, the 3 times that you'd be playing the ball as it lies when you hit some of these things, just to eliminate the need for a player to pick up their ball and move it back 2 inches. They're not gaining anything. But to that point, this concept, if your stroke doesn't count and you fail to replay it, maybe you didn't know you had to do that, there's no longer a disqualification. It's just going to be a penalty, a 2-stroke penalty. So again, you're starting to see more disqualification penalties leave the rules because 2 strokes is a lot. So and in a lot of these cases, you're not going to have a significant advantage. You haven't gained a lot when you've hit a power line and you didn't, move the ball backwards, because where your ball should have been on the green and now it's 15 feet in front of you. 2 strokes covers it. So that's another change you'll notice kind of throughout the rules. It's mentioned in that recreating your lie in the sand. All right, you put your ball back, but you don't exactly put all the sand back on top of it. I mean, 2 strokes takes care of it. So you'll see that, and it's also mentioned under the general changes in that principal changes that's inside each booklet. But a good one to know as that continues to change. We've already kind of, Rob, I don't know if you want to scroll down. We've already talked about back on the line relief, and this is going to be in there a number of times. So it's the one concept: drop on the line like you used to drop on the line before 2019, and you will have one club length for the ball to roll. It just makes it a lot easier and takes the guesswork out of it. And you can use your reasonable judgment to make sure you've dropped on the line. Okay, we're not going to freak out because there's been 1 inch off the line. That's the key. You know, you're using reasonable judgment to drop on the line, and your ball can roll up to 1 club length from that spot.
Yep. Perfect. Hey, this embedded ball relief is somewhat important. Y'all may have never heard of this being an issue, but it actually was. If the spot directly behind the ball was not in the general area and your ball embedded, say the face of a bunker above the sand, so it was in the general area embedded and there was no place directly behind the ball, you didn't have a place for relief. The rules weren't providing you relief for an embedded ball. You were stuck if there was no place there in the general area. So all of this is doing now is basically saying, look, now if that's the case, I've plugged into the face of a bunker. It's on kind of a little peninsula sticking out towards me, and on all sides is bunker, not near the hole. I'm going to either move to the left, to the right, or behind me, whichever is the nearest, and that'll be my spot that I'll put a tee in the ground and get my 1 club length relief area from. So no matter what, if my ball's embedded in the general area now, I am getting the relief provided under 16.3b. It just may not be from the spot directly behind the ball. And I'm telling you, this was extremely rare, but in Savannah, the very first year that we did it, I had this pop up with, I think it was Lawrence Chan. And I mean, it was the worst scenario you could possibly have. The ball was horribly plugged. There was it was just bunker behind him. His ball's overhanging, just barely stuck into this lip. It was horrendous. And I felt like a horrible official for making him play it. And I think all of our staff would. So this is just cleaned up from examples like that. Daniela, I really think that I'd like to at least cover these penalties in par bogey, these different formats, but then open it up to some questions here, because I have a feeling there's more questions probably that are important than anything else that I have on my list.
All right. Well, one real quick, and then you can hit up par bogey.
Do it.
This reasonable time when to identify a ball, this stemmed from I don't want to call it an incident, but an example that happened on the PGA Tour. But essentially, what this is saying is that if the player finds the ball between the 2 and 3 minute window in the search, they're going to be given a reasonable amount of time to find that ball, and that should be no more than 1 minute. And an example of that is I find my ball at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. It takes me about 15 seconds to walk over there. My ball's stuck in a tree. All right, I'm going to be given a little bit of a reasonable amount, which is going to be up to the referee or the committee, but a reasonable amount of time to find that ball because of the situation.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry, Daniela. A reasonable amount of time beyond the 3 minutes or within the 3 minutes? You still have 3 minutes to find the ball, correct?
So yeah, currently you have 3 minutes to find and identify your golf ball. And if you find your ball at 2 minutes and 59 seconds, you would be given a little bit of extra time, a reasonable amount of time to identify your golf ball. The ball's been found, you would have that few extra seconds. What this is doing is really just putting a number on what they consider reasonable, because in this situation that happened, it took the player like 6 minutes to gather binoculars and identify their golf ball. And what this is saying is that's not reasonable. So this term is just
isn't the amount of subjectivity in the term reasonable amount of time, and that's going to differ between competitor and opponent.
Well, and the reason that
make it more vague.
Yeah, well, not quite, a little bit, and yes, everyone's going to have a little bit of differing opinion, but this is putting a hard end to reasonable is no more than 1 minute. So their clarification talks about it, saying, your ball might be stuck up in a tree, and you reasonable is up to 1 minute to identify your golf ball, and anything past that, you're out of luck. So
the hard and fast line is 3 minutes to find your golf ball, an additional minute to identify it and verify that it's yours.
Up to if it's reasonable. If my ball's in the rough, I'm not going to give you a minute to identify it. But if my ball's stuck up in a tree and it's going to take me longer to either get something to view it or to climb up the tree to view it, I have up to a minute to do that.
So it's at the opponent's discretion
it's technically at the committee's discretion, but what this clarification that is mentioned, 18.2A1/3, is telling us that what is considered the maximum amount of time for reasonable is going to be 1 minute. So anything past that would not be considered reasonable, but it's going to be situational, because to the point earlier, in the rough, it's not going to take you very long to identify your golf ball. You mark it, you lift it, it's over. In the tree, it's going to be a little harder to figure out that's yours. I mean, I've had players stand on a golf cart, throw an umbrella at it. I mean, there's been plenty of stuff. So you're going to have up to 1 minute in that case. And it's a lot easier now to tell a player, okay, I'm going to give you a minute to figure out if that's your ball in a tree, rather than, okay, how long have you really been trying to throw this umbrella to knock the golf ball down, or to get a hold of some binoculars? It's a lot easier to put a time limit on that. Rob?
No, you nailed it. I'd like to just let everybody know about these 21 penalties in Stableford and par bogey. Look, there's some exceptions where they basically now, these penalties are applied in stroke play except for 5 instances. It's the same 5 instances. You all should just take a peek at that if you're getting into any of your team play stuff, your par bogey or Stableford, whether you do that for a member guest, a member, etc. Just know that it's in there, is all that I would say. I don't want to get caught in the weeds with that with our time right now, but I really would like to open up some questions. There's again, for y'all that are on there, this USGA website, this is what the document's going to look like. Back at the top here, outcome changes, 2019 rules to 2023 rules comparison. I would just go ahead and export that as a PDF, print it, have it with you. Extremely helpful document to have, just at your place of business and or something to study at night before you're going out and playing starting January 1. John, do we have any questions on there? Is there anything?
Well, at the moment, no, but I've got a couple of questions on my own. With these outcome changes, just in your circle of professionals and experts, what are you anticipating the top 2 media frenzy or social media buzz changes expected to be?
I think they'll probably, I'll pick one, and then I'll let Lendl pick one. I really think it's going to be this 9.3. I really think there's going to be backlash, just some of the memes and some of the kind of latching on to, okay, well, Ricky Fowler, Mark Leishman, all these guys who have been penalized multiple times from a ball rolling back into a penalty area and having to wait basically 4 years to correct it. I think, to me, that's a big one, is where we see these clear holes in the rules of golf, and we try to, they try to correct them with these clarifications from time to time, but this was a significant change. This isn't something that they could have changed with the clarification and said, hey, starting in 2022, this is how it's going to be. So I think it's stuff like that. There are rules like this that get in there that happen. I think that's, media wise, you'll see that covered. It's going to happen again. It's going to happen early in the year, somewhere on the West Coast swing, and it will be TV worthy, where that's now not a penalty when it was.
Daniela, how about you?
I think mine would potentially be the back on the line relief. I mean, we've used it before, but players have spent years now getting used to this opposite way of doing it. So, for us, there's going to be a lot of communication to our players about, hey, you got to do it this way. Here's how it's changed. Kind of forget everything you learned over the last 3 years and go back to what you knew before. But a lot of these changes are really incorporating either local rules or eliminating penalties. So, they're not going to kind of latch on. But to Rob's point, that ball at rest, the natural forces, the Ricky Fowler waste management rule, basically, the Pat Perez waste management rule, that one will get a lot of traction, I think, when it happens and the player is saved of penalty.
Yeah, and I do think, it was the very first rule that we popped on here and you covered, Lendl, and I think it's very important. It's sneaky, is the reasonable judgment. And I do think that you'll hear that term on television broadcasts when it comes to many different scenarios coming up in the coming year. And with the PGA Tour broadcasts, you'll notice that you're going to have either a USGA or one of our PGA Tour referees who are in the booth per se, monitoring these rule situations, and will speak to them. And I think that's a term that you're going to get more and more comfortable with and hear more and more often, is using a player's reasonable judgment in determining some of these places. Where is the golf ball? Is the golf ball lost in temporary water? That would be the perfect example. Is, you know, or is it in temporary water? The reasonable judgment of, is it in there? Is it out of bounds? The ball's in a tree. We can't string stake to stake and see that the ball's inbounds or out. So we're having to use reasonable judgment to determine if that ball's inbounds or out of bounds. So it's just, I think they're making an emphasis on it, and I think you'll hear that more often coming up. I don't know if it'll necessarily spark a media firestorm, but I do think that you'll see it out there.
Also, to Rob's and to this whole topic, I don't know this for sure, but it happened when the 2019 rule changes happened. I would imagine there will be some coverage and potentially like a campaign on Golf Channel. When the 2019 rules came out, they were significantly different, but I wouldn't, I think there will be more resources and more videos to come out to help, answer all these questions as we get closer to January 1st.
Well, excellent. I mean, that is all the time that we have this morning. I don't have any other questions. Any final questions from the audience, the membership that's on this morning's call? Going once, going twice. On behalf of the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA, I want to thank Daniela and Rob from the PGA Tour for taking some time to be with us this morning to educate the section on some of these significant changes that are coming. I mean, that standing putter one, I mean, I'm going to get on the phone as soon as we get off the call. I've got to call 3 different guys right now and get that on their radar because I know it'll come up. But wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to educate the section, and all the members that are on this morning's call. You will receive 1 PDR credit for attending this morning's Catalyst.